Hey everyone, welcome to the TDR Trade to Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Hope you all had a great weekend. Off to a good start already this week. Why should you listen to the podcast here today? Real important. In a recent announcement, the head of the HHS outlined that his agency is uniquely positioned to update all science to ensure that drugs are properly classified under federal law. And I find the timing of this rather interesting. So, to learn more about that, let's welcome in the two gents. As usual, our lead financial writer, Benjamin A. Smith. I hope you had a good weekend, along with TDR lead, or I should say, millennial investor, Anthony Varrell. How are you guys? Hope you had a good weekend.
How's it going?
Yeah,
really great weekend. Yeah.
Really good weekend. Let's begin. So, Anthony, I want to start. I know that we talked about this a little bit last week, but 90 days ago, and the HHS recommended to the DEA that cannabis be rescheduled. We saw a lot of these tier 2 companies actually they ripped more than any other stock. Are you starting to see that same trend in the event that we do get some sort of announcement regarding the DEA relatively soon?
I don't think it has really implications on if we're going to get the announcement or not, but I mean, it's kind of looking like a precursor. I mean, AYR was up another 13% today. Jushi was up another 12% today. Cresco is up another 10% today. I mean, that trend or that trend that was called out by Sammy that kind of really got my attention. And I mean, I kind of looked into it and he was spot on with what was going on. I mean, the 1 week performance of AYR's 45%, Jushi 73%, Cresco 27%, GTI 9.5%, TRUL 12%, VRNO 20%, TerraSend 10%. So those tier 2s and tier 3s, they are outperforming on a relative basis, especially on the week chart. And I mean, that trend with volume is continuing today. Top of my screen, it's AYR, SNDL, Jushi, Cannabis, Cresco, Tilt, and then you've got GTI.
What Cannabis? Cannabis, they got their earnings tomorrow morning.
Cannabis earnings are out tomorrow before the bell. They're trading 10%. They're up 10% right now on 550,000 shares traded today. And let's not forget that they were a victim of forced selling by that fund blowing up in Canada about 2 weeks ago that everybody found out about day after we started to see the immense sell pressure in the name. So, I mean, yeah, those tier 2s and tier 3s are continuing that trend and they're outperforming everybody else on a relative basis.
And the debt announcement back in September, that price was $1.53, was it? If I remember correctly. The raise
that they did. I think it was at about $1, somewhere between $1.40 and $1.50. Was that raise that was announced, which they're now trading at 45 cents a share.
Yeah. Is this another indicator that if we get some sort of news that, again, stocks will rip and this is all driven by retail? Because I don't think institutions, from what I'm hearing, they will get in eventually. But even if the DEA were to announce and approve a rescheduling, I still think that it's going to be a while before institutions step in. Or do you guys disagree with that?
I think you got 12 to 18 months after they actually announce Schedule 3 before institutions step in.
Yeah.
If they announced it tomorrow, I mean, we were talking about this earlier with Anthony from New Lake. You're going to have legal challenges. You're going to have the actual rules and regs need to be written and then implemented. And institutions, it's a custody issue. It's not whether they want to, it's the fact that they can't. Yeah. So, I mean, if their compliance department tells them, hey, we can't hold this paper, or hey, we can't get access to this paper via our transfer agent or our clearinghouse, there's nothing they can do. They can't buy the paper, even if it is descheduled. I mean, until the custody issue is solved, institutions will not come in. So that's not happening anytime soon.
So remember that. It's not so much that they don't want to, they just can't. And I assume that you're in full agreement with that, Ben?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It has nothing to do with them not wanting to get in. In fact, we hear that some people in the industry are getting their own positions. They're building their own positions personally, but they can't from an institutional perspective. These are people who work at investment banks and so forth, right? So people want to get in personally, but until the plumbing is fixed on the exchanges, they simply cannot. I mean, the covenants in a lot of funds, growth funds or small cap funds or whatnot, simply cannot own OTC stocks. Full stop. So it has no bearing on whether they want to. I'm sure they do, but they just can't.
Yeah. Player one, hello from Tampa. We got people from Italy that are coming in here today. That's Sagida. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. But yeah, happy Monday to everybody out there. This is the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzenga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales, with Benjamin A. Smith and Anthony Varrell. This is segment number 1, Into the Wire, where we headline basically the biggest headlines of the day in cannabis, psychedelics, and crypto. Let's now switch to headline number 2 in Washington, where, as I said off the top, the head of the HHS outlined that his agency is uniquely positioned to update the science to ensure that drugs are properly classified under federal law. Timing of this is interesting, Ben. So you want to elaborate a little bit more on what this could mean?
Yeah, this came during a hearing before the Senate Appropriations Committee. That's going to be held on Wednesday. And a senator, his name is Martin Hendrick from New Mexico, asked Secretary Becerra whether about the descheduling process. He didn't mention cannabis specifically, but he asked him about how his agency's role in the CSA, the Controlled Substance Act, and how they amend that. And that's when he made the comment, Becerra did, about updating the science and being uniquely positioned to do that. So I don't think this is any huge revelation or necessarily an actionable event, but we can infer from those comments that they're gathering all the data that they have to be able to submit to the DEA so that they can make a reasonable decision. And I guess we can infer that they, support this, actually more than infer. They recommended it. So you would assume that, the scientific reports that they're giving to the DEA are mostly favorable, or a lot of them will be. And they're just, I guess they're going to put all sorts of scientific reports, good and bad, but they're definitely going to have a key role in whether the DEA acts.
Interesting. Aesthetic exploration. Nice comment. FYI, 1998, the HHS recommended Marinol schedule change. DEA agreed in 57 days. 2013, HHS recommended hydrocodone schedule change. DEA agreed in 73 days. We're currently at 75 days. I like to speculate, but those are two completely separate situations. So needless to say, many people that are following this industry are following this very, very closely. Okay, let's now jump into this week's earnings calls with notable names that will be reporting their latest earnings. Anthony, break it down as to who will be reporting and what you'll be watching.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for the Cannabis tomorrow morning before the bell. Then we'll be actually seeing Nick Vita in Brooklyn at one of their major dispensaries for the live stream on Wednesday. Which will be nice. But I mean, I'm looking forward to their earnings. Jushi are after the bell tomorrow. Goodness Growth are after the bell tomorrow. That's not a name that I usually follow, but there's a lot of buzz around them pertaining to their Maryland footprint.
Why is that?
And how that's going to perform, because they don't really have much, but they do have a formidable footprint in Maryland. Stock was actually performing pretty well last week. So I'm actually going to look into that to catch those Maryland numbers and see if there's any validation there as to what people were talking about. Cresco's Wednesday before the bell. Cresco, I consider a tier 1. I mean, Cresco's got a strong business. They surprised me last quarter after kind of dogging them before earnings. So I'll be looking for that. And then AYR Wellness is Thursday before the bell. AYR Wellness is kicking ass right now. I wasn't actually aware before I put the show notes together that it was actually up the amount that it is on the week with 45%. That's a strong move. I think that's on the move with the backs of them restructuring their debt and really kicking the can down the road to 2026. People threw their arms up and said, well, this is going to be a big dilutionary event. I'd argue that 30% of the company might be worth $400 million at that point in time. So, I mean, we'll just wait and see. But, I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing AYR's numbers, see what's going on in Florida, see what's going on in the rest of their markets, listen to the conference call for commentary as it relates to the debt restructuring. And, I mean, that's pretty much the basket of what's going on this week.
And a company that we've talked about, Consortium, I believe, reports too. Correct,
no,
Anthony?
they won't report until the 27th of November.
Oh, is it the 27th? Okay.
Yeah, trust me, I would be looking out for them. I'm looking forward to their earnings, seeing what's going on in Florida. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's either the 27th or the 29th of November that they're reporting.
Luca M, we'll get into this a bit, but I don't know if you guys saw, but Awaken Life Sciences down over 50% today.
Dude,
they had. I read the news. So what happened is, I believe they issued the old Friday afternoon press release, and they were not in compliance with SIBO listing standards or something like that. They're the regulatory standards to list on that exchange, and I think that's probably the reaction to that news.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it was 20x. It was basically 20x average volume. that it dumped today.
Wow. This is a company.
Yeah, well, if you can't list, people reach for the exit doors first. I have no idea whether they, can regain that compliance. But traders usually shoot first and ask questions later.
Yeah. Ben Collar, any info on MariMed? We're reaching out to them. Hopefully we can get them on this week. They had an action-packed week last week. Meeting with a lot
Glass
of
House. Glass House is after the bell. They'll report at 5:00 tonight.
Okay.
That's always an interesting one too, right, Anthony? I think Anthony would agree with me because they have a model which is a little bit different from the standard MSOs. And they're very California based.
I was taken back when we spoke to Kyle. I mean, a lot of my questions were around branding and retail, and it didn't really seem like that was where his focus was. As far as the business goes, a lot of that business is focused on scale in the wholesale market, which I think is a smart business strategy. But I'd like to see where they're going with their retail, where they're going with their brands, where they're going in California. I wouldn't be banking on interstate commerce as heavy as they were really indicating in the short term. But we'll see what the earnings say and see how they are. They already reported.
I think Kyle's looking 5 to 10 years out. He's mentioned that before. So
let's reach out to. Let's reach out to Kyle Kazan and have him on a Twitter space either tomorrow or Wednesday night if possible. But finish your thoughts. Sorry, Ben.
No, I was just saying we've had him on before, and he indicates he's invested in real estate in the past, and he has a very longer term timeline. So he doesn't expect interstate commerce to happen anytime soon, but when it does, he plans to have his business positioned for that. And that again, I mentioned this in the past, but Glass House is a company I'm looking at for the long term, because when that interstate commerce does come in, you could easily foresee Curaleaf, GTI, one of the big tier 1 MSOs come in and perhaps buy out that company because their cost of scale is going to be so low. Because it doesn't make sense for the long term to have a vertically integrated model with grows in each state. That doesn't really make sense. It makes more sense to centralize in one place.
Gotcha. Earnings are solid on first glance for Glass House. Revenue's up 8% sequentially, 71% year over year. Their cash position increased. Operating cash flow reached a record of $9.1 million versus $8.3 million in Q2 2023. Adjusted EBITDA grew. Looks like they grew on pretty much every metric.
Brad Clark, appreciate the feedback.
Definitely need to dive into this further. I'm sure we'll have something out on Twitter or cover it Wednesday we won't cover it Wednesday on stream with Cannabis, but we'll definitely dive into these deeper. But at first glance, this looks solid.
Yeah.
And this is probably what sticks out to me the most, which I want to look into more. The average selling price per pound was up 65% versus last year. That is a testament to the California market making a rebound. So, that's one thing that I'd love to talk to Kyle about and dig in deeper on. Because that's a big metric.
Interesting. Again, Brad Clark, appreciate the feedback. Love listening or having you guys on, guys like you to give us some feedback. We'd love to hear about just comments below and some of the feedback that you guys want us to cover. But yeah, we're here for you guys, here for people like you. John Verville, a regular. Republican Nancy Mace making sure the government is ready to standardize the federal law. Could be the case, but it's always great to hear from you. Now, let's switch to our next headline. This is the TDR Trade of Black podcast on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm Shad Dales with Benjamin A. Smith, Anthony Varrell. Our last headline is SNDL. They released, actually, their earnings this morning. And Ben, break it down for us. What did you see? I think all in all, it was a strong call, I should say strong report, but highlight maybe some of the numbers that grabbed your attention.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty decent overall report. Net revenue for the third quarter was $23.76 million compared to $230.5 million in the third quarter last year. So a 3% increase year over year on the overall revenue profile. The big thing for me is they produced positive free cash flow. Which for this quarter was $16.5 million. And that compares to a negative $67.1 million 1 year ago in that quarter. And even if you look at sequentially, they did not actually issue that free cash flow number in the last press release. So it was not positive or not something that they wanted to highlight. So that's very good. Stock was up 12% today, so it had a good reaction. And they also further announced that they had a stock buyback. So they've authorized to purchase up to, I believe, 100 million worth of stock repurchases of common shares. So that's always a good sign when the stock wants to, when the company wants to buy back its own shares.
Cannabis retail posted a 14.1% increase year over year as well. So I think that was a notable number that we actually spoke to Zach George earlier today. We'll be posting that podcast tomorrow, but that's a significant number, I think, that people can't overlook.
I mean, Zach's crushing it. Yeah, all the metrics were up. All the metrics were up on the Canadian retail side.
Yeah,
their metrics were stable on the alcohol side. I mean, I know we've got the podcast with them coming out this week that we shot today. But I mean, yeah, they're focused on automation north of the border.
Yep.
I mean, they're not opposed to growing the Canadian footprint. Sunstream is performing well.
Yeah.
I mean, they've turned around this beast in 24 months.
Yeah.
I do think that they will probably exercise their right to buy back their stock because, I mean, he said with conviction that, I mean, stock's undervalued here compared to where it's trading. And you can make several arguments that the stock is undervalued, not only on their operating business, but I mean, if you just factor in Sunstream, you could argue that their stock is undervalued.
You make a good point about him with conviction. That is a guy that gives you the brutal honest about everything. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. I like that.
I believe him.
His character.
I believe him. He's straight. He's to the point. He's poignant and he's focused.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that shows in the business. And I mean, this company is probably going to continue just to look better and better and better. It was a convoluted mess when he took it over, and they've got done what they needed to get done, and they're going to continue to do that. I mean, I'm looking forward to where this company goes.
And they're looking to add with Nova Cannabis. I know they pushed back the closing date several times, but I think it's going to go through. And Nova Cannabis actually produced a positive net income as well. So
it did.
I know
it looks like that they could have more accretive earnings on their balance sheet soon enough if that closes November 30th.
Yeah. John Verville writes 2 quarters of no buybacks, though. Thanks for the heads up on that. But all in all, we'll have the full details with Zach George in the podcast. We're going to post that tomorrow morning, probably around 11 a.m. Eastern time. But yeah, good results for Nova Cannabis. We didn't touch on that last week, but to your point, the company earned a positive net income, which was huge. We had some people that reached out to us and outlined to me that obviously SNDL is their biggest shareholder with 35 million shares. But all in all, seems like from what I gathered, they're heading in the right direction, needless to say. All right. That wraps up the first segment, Into the Wire, which basically headlines a lot of stuff pertaining to the cannabis, psychedelic, and crypto industries, as we're covering a lot of the cannabis side of things right now. Let's segue into segment number 2, which is our Daily Movers section. Anthony, we begin with you. We'll stay on cannabis and a company that you mentioned that's announcing their latest earnings before the bell tomorrow. The Cannabis Company Holdings, formerly Columbia Care. You're watching them. Why?
Yeah, I mean, I'm watching them just because of where they are from a price action standpoint. I mean, they've lagged the rally. They got beat down from that forced selling. And I mean, I'm expecting them to report a good quarter. They're in a lot of markets that are very, very much, there's very much to like about them. They're not showing any signs of any of these numbers that should be dipping in terms of growth. And I mean, I think that they're righting the ship. They're getting out of that faux pharma, the faux pharma kind of moniker that they've been had for a very long time with Columbia Care. It worked well when Nick started the business. They were medical focused. They're not medical focused anymore. They're adult use focused. The cannabis is going to lead them there in terms of branding. And I mean, I think that they're going to post a solid quarter tomorrow. I'm definitely watching them on this report.
Well, like you said earlier, we're going to be in Brooklyn, New York on Wednesday. We'll be at their dispensary with their CEO, Nicholas Fida. So we'll be talking about their latest earnings, among other things. Hope to have a few more other guests that'll be at the dispensary that day. But the most important thing, being on location, highlighting and showcasing, obviously, their dispensary, but getting, I guess, more information on the direction of this company, which I think will be a lot of fun. Next up, Daily Movers, MSOs. Arguably the juggernaut of the industry, Ben. You're watching them. Why? What are you seeing on the first day of trading this week?
Yeah, just from a technical perspective, there's a consolidated base around the 680 area, which it broke down and actually touched under 5 on the back of when the HHS rally fizzled out, and now it's back up there. So it's touching the bottom of that base, and I think so nothing particularly actionable, but that is a key resistance point to look at near term. But I think this overall, it's nice to see MSOs melting up, right? We're so used to it dripping down for quarter after quarter after quarter for the last 3 years. Now we're in a dynamic where, you had Ohio issue 2 go through. You had pretty solid earnings reports all around so far. No big surprises, no big outlier surprises. And then you have the expectation of rescheduling. So now MSOs, from that low point is sort of just, drifting up, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of selling. So do I expect it, to be a huge run before the announcement? Not necessarily, but I think we're in conditions where we can make higher lows and then build a base for, an eventual, higher move if that news comes.
Makes sense. Right, Anthony?
Yeah. I mean, I positioned myself in it. I'm in MSOS calls. I got them at about 590. Stock's sitting at 680 now.
Yeah. How much are they up now then?
Decent amount. They're $9 January 17th strike. $9 strike January 17th.
Yeah.
Calls. That and the Canopy calls that I bought were doing decent today with the stock up 4%, which are leaps. But yeah, both are positioned well. And I know that John, who's a avid watcher of the show, back when I called Solana at 42, said that it was a trap. Solana hit 62 this weekend.
So what do you want to say?
It's a trap for the bears.
That being said, it's retraced. It retraced from 62 to 52 right now. But still, I mean, I think Solana's got some legs.
Bulls and bears make money. Yeah. Bulls and bears make money. Pigs get slaughtered, right?
Yep.
Important to share, as usual, that all views on the Trade to Black podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Please make sure that you understand that.
It's phony stuff. It didn't happen.
Love you, Mitch.
Oh, there's the...
Next up, this is an interesting one. Nothing in particular regarding stocks, but Ben, you're watching the Consumer Price Index report this week. The latest report will be announced tomorrow, Tuesday, and all eyes will be on inflationary numbers. What do we need to watch and pay attention to?
Yeah, we always got to keep our eye on these big headline economic numbers because they end up moving markets, and then that moves individual component stocks. So I'm looking at the Consumer Price Index, and that number pulled by economists, they expect the headline number to have slowed to 3.3% in October from 3.7% in September. And this is important because, what's moving the market right now is the expectation of the Fed and rate hikes. And that's part of the reason why we had this rally, 2 weeks on now. And, we've highlighted this. We mentioned it on Twitter, that note that Goldman said that the rate hikes are over. And then that week we saw, the S&P rise 5.6%. The NASDAQ rose 6.3%. And there was a big short squeeze because it's all about rates. It's all about, the interest rate rating hike cycle being halted. Because if that happens, then, it's going to help the economy and it's going to help consumer spending. So yeah. I'm looking for hopefully a number that comes in line with expectations and no surprises there. If it does, maybe the broad market rally has more room.
What's the number you're anticipating, or what the expectations are?
Expectations are 3.3% in October. So anything 3.3% or lower is going to make the odds that the Fed will not hike rates because inflation's in control.
Right. Interesting stuff.
What do you think? So what do you think about, you follow this stuff pretty closely, Ben, but what do you think about these numbers when they constantly get revised? Like we get a headline number out tomorrow, then let's say we get a headline out number tomorrow, it beats. Then they revise it like 2 weeks later to where it's like a huge miss. It's like, what's the point if there's so much volatility, I guess, in these numbers or inaccuracy when they
that's actually a really great question because there's a lot of like shenanigans that going on there. But I sort of highlight it. I sort of reckon it to like, a news story that comes in the New York Times or like a mainstream media. They come with the headline news. As soon as they post that, that becomes the reality. And even though 2 or 3 weeks later, sometimes they'll revise the story, change the facts of it. So the market's going to react on the headline number of that day. Whether it gets revised 2 weeks later, that's almost like an afterthought, even though it is relevant and it does matter. But it's really the headline number that day that, sets the expectation and moves the markets. And nobody remembers what happens on the revision.
And somebody on Twitter asked if we'll cover MetaPharm's earnings. I think MetaPharm reports later in the week on Tuesday or Wednesday, which, we'll probably take a dive into them. It's a good old name that I've got stock in from a very long time ago. So
wow,
we can,
Yeah,
we'll
I still remember when MetaPharm was the hottest Canadian stocks, or one of the hottest, because they were selling all the extract like 5 years ago when no one else had it. So they had this huge demand. Revenues were, going insane.
Yep.
And then the stock went insane. And then, of course, dynamics changed.
It hit a wall. Yeah.
Keith Strawn, Pat McCutcheon. He's working on
great guys.
Great guys.
And they were at the forefront. They had the model right. They had the idea right. But I mean, MetaPharm kind of fizzled with the rest of the Canadian LPs after that massive rally.
Yeah. And if anybody's out there that
run in demand,
you should check out our one playlist.
Run in demand for their extracts and all that. And then that there was the uptake stopped, and then so did the revenues.
Yeah.
But
shenanigans, LL, those rascals. Yeah, you saw a lot of that, to say the least. If you actually want to see some cool videos, go onto our playlist, and we've got some great videos of Where Are They Now. We had some really retro names back in the day. Who was one? Was it Terry Booth? Cam Batley? It's another name.
Cam Batley was a cannabis pioneer.
Yeah.
Aurora Cannabis. Mr. I worked at Eli Lilly. Big Pharma's looking at cannabis. You should look at Aurora.
Right. Jeff Sessions, Vic Neufeld. It's going way back, huh?
Big Dick Vic. Vic was...
You had to say it, right?
I love the chain that he used to wear.
Dude, it was the best.
Shirt and then
his shirt was wide open. He'd be like, Afria, we produce for the lowest cost per gram. Buy our stock.
Yeah.
We got these massive
sticking out of the chest.
Yeah. You guys remember on stockhouse.com when he had all those followers going to like the Windsor airport and taking pictures and seeing Diageo logos on planes? Like it was a freaking army. But
Vic was a goat.
Thick Vic. Yes. Cybin Bounce today. Someone take a Skip Bayless take. Interesting.
Yeah, I'll do a quick comment on that. We talked about on the previous podcast about how once the dust settles, it might be a good time to enter Cybin, and I think we kind of saw that. We had the raise, we had the the price action sort of drop 5 or 6 cents below the raise price, and that got scooped up. So hopefully
Canopy, let's hope. I'm full disclosure. I'm a shareholder of the company, and they're also a client of ours. So just be mindful of that. Canopy was all over the place today as well, writes John Verville.
It was. It was down 2 or 3% in the first hour trading, then started to rise with the MSOs, which was kind of surprising. But as I keep saying, and the reason that I'm in the name, it trades as a proxy to the U.S. sector.
Yeah, 100%. Luca, I just want to get back to you on the whole Awaken thing. So we saw obviously the news. We're going to reach out to Anthony and a few of the people to see if we can get in front of this at some point this week. Thanks for obviously shared some of the other stuff. Compass hit 501 all-time low today.
I think they're actually, getting hurt a little bit by what's going on with Cybins and their research being, maybe
better
considered to be better by some. I don't know. Again, we have a relationship with the company, so I don't want to be too judgmental. But when they're 14-point matters raise, and Compass had 6, and their dose was 25 milligrams over 12. I think people are kind of looking at this, granted different conditions, TRD versus MDD, but same ballpark, and maybe people are looking at that
TRD is the bigger problem. I mean, TRD is what SSRIs just won't work for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's Compass TRD. So granted, it might be a little bigger hurdle, but people are comparing the research.
I thought you said Cybin was TRD. And Compass
is TRD. I think Cybin is MDD.
Okay. Well, larger addressable market and MDD. So either way, it's
they're pretty comparable, though. I mean, one might be a little bit more harder with the treatment resistant, but major depressive disorder. I mean, you're looking at.
I mean, I hate to be a cheerleader, obviously, because they are a paid client of ours, but I'd be saying it regardless. I mean, they're arguably one of the only companies in the psychedelic sector that you could make an argument for that is investable.
Yeah.
And that's not financial advice. That's not saying go out and buy the stock. But if you're looking at something that you can actually see the light at the end of the tunnel and see execution from the management team, it's been Cybin time and time again.
Yeah.
A tie and Compass just have a ton of question marks around them that don't seem to be getting answered anytime soon.
Ben, I like how you bring up the idea too, just to be like factual information that yes, they are a client, but at the same time too, you got to look at it from a pure science perspective, and the data obviously tells the truth, right?
I always kind of built like I'm just a truth teller. I'm going to say, you know, the way I view things, regardless of whether a client or not. I try to be truthful because I mean everybody deserves to have information, good information, whether you know you have a relationship with the client or not, right? So
yeah.
I try to give it straight.
You know what's crazy is that Awaken Life Sciences, it's unfortunate with what the news came down, but this is a company that's basically getting a phase 3 trial sponsored, which is crazy. And to think of where it sits right now.
With the biotech, though, I will take a sell-off on capital markets news versus like the trial getting like disbanded by the NHS or something over there.
Yeah.
That really should have warranted a 50% drop. I don't know what this is, so I can't really comment on it. I'm sure we'll reach out to Anthony and get a statement from Awaken or some sort of direction as per what this means. But if we're talking to biotech stock, I will take a sell-off on capital markets news versus something that's like detrimental to the trials or the actual core business. Not to try to find a silver lining here, but
although you know, the capital markets news sort of affects their ability to raise. So it's kind of one A and one B. And I know you know that, but so this is kind of important. But I think if they can regain listing, if it's not like a long-term situation, then it could be a good opportunity to at least look at it. If they're, you know, if we're taking like a 50% haircut and their listing is going to remain intact in the long term.
Yeah. All right, gents, that wraps up segment 2 of Daily Movers, among other things, here on the TDR Traded Black podcast, here on the Benzinga Television Network. So just a quick recap as we close things out. Tier 2 and Tier 3 companies appear to be running it back in the event we get rescheduling, with these categorized companies showing that they could be the biggest early movers again, similar to what we saw in September. The head of the HHS made some pretty eye-opening information today that his agency is uniquely positioned to advance science to ensure that all drugs are properly classified under federal law. That is a big one, to say the least. Cresco, Jushi, AYR, the Cannabis, all notable names among a few others, will be releasing their earnings later this week. And pretty much wraps it up for today's show. But Anthony, safe travels. I will see you in the Big Apple tomorrow. And when we're going to Terrasend and the dispensary at the Cannabis, for all of our viewers out there, let us know if there's anything in particular that you'd like us to film, any questions that you'd like us to ask. Let us know. Be more than happy to film that stuff, showcase some of that stuff. What were you going to say?
Cannabis will be able to get questions live on stream.
Yeah.
Wednesday from the dispensary. So anybody that's got any questions for the Cannabis or Nick Vita, bring them onto the show. We'll be able to, not saying we'll get to all of them, but we'll be able to pick and choose some to ask him live on stream.
Yeah. So the whole goal in some of this stuff that we're filming is going over to New Jersey and showing what they're doing right, and then coming back to Manhattan and what they're doing wrong, but then finishing things up in Brooklyn to say like, okay, Columbia Care changed their name. A lot of it is all based on culture. When you think of culture, you think of Brooklyn, New York, among other things related to the dispensary. So if there's things that you want us to ask or showcase while we're filming at the facility with Terrasend on Wednesday, let us know now and be more than happy to incorporate that while we're there. Now, all right, gents.
Just I want to give a quick shout out. Like when we saw Terrasend last month when they did their investor day in Toronto, I want to give a shout out for the pre-rolls. Like I actually tried the pre-rolls that they had at one of the functions that they had, and they're only 15% THC or whatnot, but they're actually quite good. Quite good. So
that was the best pre-roll. Those are the best pre-rolls that I've smoked in a while.
Yeah.
The glass tip and the cookies flour was pretty good.
Yeah, I was surprised because it was just a nice little buzz or feeling or whatever. It wasn't too overpowering. It tasted really good. And I'm not usually a pre-roll guy. I'm not, an everyday consumer or anything like that, but I was pleasantly surprised.
It's funny, Grills. I don't think Ohio is enough pressure for PA alone, but PA now is surrounded by adult use cannabis. I expect to see some movement in PA here shortly. They're going to get with the times finally.
Yeah. As well, if you want to actually see a lot of that footage, along with more information on what trends to expect next pertaining to the industry, important to subscribe to our newsletter. Benjamin A. Smith is the mastermind behind all that. You can go by logging on to thedalesreport.com and actually subscribe, and you'll get that feed to you every Sunday. We're actually going to be doing a daily newsletter kicking off relatively soon, especially with these industries starting to move. So that will be fun and exciting. Lots to talk about and lots on the horizon as we continue to bring this podcast to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then a full recap pre-record on Sunday evenings. Gents, have a great evening, and we'll check back in with you midweek this week.
Safe
See you
travel,
tomorrow.
guys.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network